Hey everyone. So I'm going to talk about kind of my iLead project, which is actually over patience and actually assuming intent.
My iLead project this semester has been to better address and handle my mental health in order to prevent it from inhibiting my schoolwork and social activities.
So the background for my iLead really started with those forms that we had to fill out where we asked people that were close to questions about what we need to work on. Most of mine carried the same theme. It was responses like you don't have to be the hero, focus on yourself more, get uncomfortable because you miss out on so much.
So my project, I guess kind of going from the beginning, the coaching session that we had, the weakness that people pointed out to me is that I'm a very indecisive person and I never make decisions for myself.
These were coming from people like my best friend, my brother, even my mom for the get uncomfortable one, ironically.
My weakness that people told me I had was that I was bad at being assertive with my decision making.
I received feedback from my friends and my family that I was relying a lot on my emotions and that I needed to work on creating depth rather than breadth in my relationships.
And so I did what everyone else wanted me to do and never really made time for myself. So, and Ellie's was kind of the opposite, which we'll get to later. And
I really wanted to look at that area of my life and how I make my decisions a lot of the time, because it's very much been based on grades and my career aspirations and my horses, and that's about it. It was something that when I spoke to my parents and my family members and the people close to me about things that I could do to improve myself as a person and a leader, they said that I was very impatient and that I was also really bad at just kind of assuming that people were just trying to make life harder and trying to be malicious in what they were, what their thoughts were, and that, they had just essentially not good values.
And there were ways that I thought I could shape my project around growing in these ways, but upon further reflection, I realized that all these issues connected directly to my struggle with mental illness.
So I always thought that I was making these decisions because I was trying to make other people happy. And I didn't know how to quite do a project like that, but I knew one thing that I was really struggling with for the past couple of years is that I would take on leadership positions and then never really fulfill what I say I was going to do.
I don't necessarily like to get out of my comfort zone a lot, especially like in personal relationships and stuff like that, in the areas of like going out and even with dating relationships and stuff like that. So kind of the point of this project was to look at how I make those decisions and alter them a little bit if I can, and see how that impacts my relationships and my life.
I have clinical depression, and I feel very frustrated and helpless when my mental illness gets in the way of things that I care about, such as my friendships or even my schoolwork.
So my project kind of dealt with an organization that I'm involved with here in my position because I'd gone through the whole year and not really done anything. And so my goal by the end of this project was learning how to be accountable for what I said I was going to do and finish the full role that I was placed into.
To do this, I kind of broke it into 3 sections of research, preparation, and application and reflection. For the research part, I read Off Balance by Matthew Kelly, which is basically a book about finding work-life balance, which he says is actually a myth. It's about prioritizing the things in your life that matter most. So what I did was I went and spent a lot of time talking to people that had really different values than I did, which was really interesting because this is something that I don't necessarily seek out when these situations do come upon me. I'm very outspoken, but this isn't something that I, try to go and have these conversations with people.
I came up with a list of steps that I was going to take. The first step was meeting with my psychiatrist at Lafine to discuss what options might be beneficial for me. This not only is a medical professional who understands my illness, but it's someone who understands me and understands what would be best for me, and has seen things work in other people. He was able to recommend what I should do in regards to medication, counseling, all those things.
So for my project, I was trying not to be as much of a people pleaser, and I needed to just take some time for myself because I was staying up super late and it was kind of affecting my health, that I was trying to do all these things for other people, and I was trying to build my own identity.
And one of the key phrases that I think is really important is that you should focus on energy, because you know what matters in life, and if you don't, it can be taken over by the urgent. And what he means by that is, you wake up and you have assignments to do, you have things for work that you have to get done, cleaning assignments, things like that can take precedence, and in my life a lot of times it did, over personal relationships or having fun, and just making memories, stuff like that.
So the first conversation that I had was with somebody that I work with, that I know had really different values than I did. So it was just very interesting because he and I work in the same area, and I always just shake my head all the time. Anyway, so we talked a lot about the election and this whole process, and kind of the outcomes of it. And it was very interesting because I took a lot of time to listen instead of talking to him, or like responding, I guess.
So going off of that, it seems like a pretty short-term project, and once I'm done with it, I'm not really going to learn that much from it. But going through the project, I realized something about myself, which I think is the underlying cause of why I never was going through my leadership roles for the past couple years. And that's not managing time with activities and events that I had, because I was able to still do homework. I still was involved in all these organizations, but it was more managing time with people. And I realized that I had been managing more time with what I was wanting to do and who I wanted to hang out with, instead of like what I was meaning to do and the obligations I needed to fulfill.
My second step was to find resources to learn more about the specific mental illness that I struggle with and how it affects my body, and proven methods that help to improve mental health.
Then for the preparation, I made some criteria about how I was going to evaluate some of the decisions that I was making, instead of just automatically saying yes or no to something, thinking about it a little bit more. And one of those was say no if you can, and if you truly don't want to do it.
So to do that, I was supposed to make a intentional decision a week, and so I did that for the past couple months. And some of the decisions were small, some of them were kind of bigger. So I made decisions like I would have to choose between going to like my last sorority function or going home to see my friends. And that was just kind of like a small one. But then a big one was like I had to decide which job I was going to take after graduation.
So that was kind of my biggest thing, was kind of learning to listen, to understand his point of view rather than listen to respond, which is valuable. That's like something they've been telling us for years. Hasn't quite sunk in yet.
Actually, this semester they had their first ever mental wellness week at K-State, and that was put on by the Union Program Council. It was awesome because it just kind of fell into my lap that they had a speaker coming in that week who talked about mental health. His name was Ross Szabo, and he did a presentation on campus that I went to, and it talked about coping mechanisms for mental health.
So after I realized that a couple weeks ago, I've been making conscious efforts to hang out with different people that I have had those relationships with, because relationships also is one of my values, like Brandy has her value as, and I wish that was a higher value of mine, and so I want to keep those relationships with the people that make me happy, that make me successful, and that will help me throughout the years to come.
Because a lot of times I would say yes to things such as taking on extra projects at work when I really didn't have the time for it, or I didn't want to do it, or I didn't need the money, whatever the issue was, and then say yes if it's what I want. And with that, I really meant focusing on what I think is best for me, and best for me in that situation versus what other people think, because I tend to put a lot of stock into, especially what my family and close friends think about decisions that I made.
But anyway, so that's something that I really worked on, was just listening and spending, it almost felt like I was trying to do a coaching session without coaching him, but more just trying to be more curious about what his perspective was without pushing my perspective on him, which was really interesting, because by the end of it I really was, kind of more understanding of the other side of it, and being able to kind of relate to what he was saying was his point of view, and where those values came from, and also how they were similar, but how the different things that happened in our life had kind of made them different. It was interesting.
At first, I thought that my iLead project was going to be figuring out the cause behind why I feel the way I do when I do. I was figuring out, like, okay, when I am struggling with depression, what triggered that? I have to look back at my day and figure out the exact moment that triggered that, and I need to figure out how to prevent that.
So just kind of being intentional about what was best for me instead of what was best for other people. And along the lines of these projects and these decisions, I kind of tried to follow some of my values, or at least know which ones were being shown.
And say yes if there's a chance that it could turn out to be good. Take a little bit of a risk, and just say yes just because sometimes, because everybody else is going, and if you want to experience that, and say yes unless you really don't want to, or unless it really makes me uncomfortable.
It was very interesting because, he talked a lot about his family and kind of the root of where those values did come from, like religion and just kind of his area of where he grew up. And it was really interesting to kind of see where those values did stem from and how they were different to where mine stemmed from.
But what I learned when going to the speaker was that it was more important to focus on your coping mechanisms. Because the thing is I have clinical depression, and figuring out why I have that isn't going to change the fact, but I can change how I react to it. And so that really changed the course of my project, and showed me that it would be more beneficial for me to learn how to cope. Talked about things like sleeping and eating and breathing exercises and journaling and music, and there's so many different things you can do to deal with your mental health, whether you have clinical depression or generalized anxiety, or you're just a normal college student who is struggling with their mental health because you're stressed out. These are all coping mechanisms that would be helpful to us to learn how to use.
I valued success a lot more than I thought I would. So as far as success goes, I mean, looking for jobs, and I would choose to go to interviews instead of doing other things. And those are some of the decisions I made. So just valuing success in a sense of getting a job was really important to me.
All right, so now I just want to walk you guys through some of the decisions that I made and the impact that they had on my life as a result of this project. This first one, I debated whether or not to share with the class just because it is a little bit personal, but I think it shows out the most out of these, the effects of this change in how I handled my time and decisions and stuff like that. So as far as dating goes, I haven't really bothered. I've been happy with my school life and my work and my relationships with my family and friends, that I just haven't put priority there. And when I have, I've usually gotten bored or just made reasons why it wouldn't work within a couple of weeks.
I valued involvement a lot, so being involved in my different organizations and really taking the time to enjoy those for the last couple months, that was a really big commitment that I made as well, and that I noticed in my decisions.
So the second thing that I did was I went to a program that was about conceal and carry on campus. So it was also very interesting, very heated topic for me, but I really did. I just sat and listened, and they had both sides of the issue there. It was also very interesting to hear what both people kind of had to say. Obviously, I'm very aligned with one side, but it was beneficial, I would say, for me to go in and listen to the other side, and listen to where those values kind of came into play for them.
And then my final goal was just to create something. I really love to create. I love to write. I love videos, photos, projects, art, and I just wanted to create something to showcase what I've learned, not only as kind of a culmination of this project, but to be able to use my knowledge to help others.
And then probably the biggest challenge for me was my value of relationships, because I think that's why I put people above myself so much. It's just because that's my top value is my relationships, and so my family and friends. And so the conflict for me, the biggest conflict and the hardest part about this project was to kind of take a step back from that and be committed to myself instead of being committed to all my relationships, which sounds terrible, but I guess that's just what I needed to work on.
But in January, I started talking to a guy in Kansas City, which is where I'm going to move when I graduate, and we just hit it off really well, and I kind of made it a point. I was like, I'm going to see where this one goes. I'm not going to be my own roadblock in this relationship and just see what happens. So that was everything from just responding to texts more promptly, like if I'm working, taking the time out to take that conversation, making time to go out with him and actually just spend time with him versus putting everything else first. And we just hit 4 months of dating, hanging out, not really sure what to call it at this point, but I'm excited to see where the possibilities of that go, and I think it's a direct result of changing that mindset a little bit and changing my approach to that part of my life.
So, talking about, because to me it's like, okay, well, let's talk about safety. Whose safety are we talking about? And I think that's a very different, where is that coming from? Where's your value there when you're talking about safety, and whose safety are you valuing? And, when you're talking about, freedom to carry guns and all of those things too, like I think that those conflicting values, it's, you have a freedom to safety and you have a freedom to carry guns, so what kind of trumps what, which was really interesting to see kind of how different people's perspectives kind of collided to decide what was and wasn't correct in this specific instance, since those two values were kind of competing.
I guess my learning lesson actually didn't really come from my project, which I was successful in that I made progress on the project and I had a smooth transition with the new officer, but I wish I could have done more, and I really regret not working on it throughout the whole year.
The second one is kind of around that same topic of going out just with friends. Even though I am 21 and have been since October, I don't really like the taste of alcohol anyway, but I've never really put a lot of priority or understood why people spend so much time doing that. But I went to Seattle over a couple weeks ago, earlier in the semester, to work and judge and present at a journalism conference, and they had a cocktail party that we were all invited to, and we went, and I had a couple drinks and realized that it wasn't that bad, and a couple of weekends since then I've gone out with some of those girls that I got to know really well at that, and I made some new friendships through that. I got closer with some of my other friends, and I realized that there is a place and a way to make that fit in and kind of to represent that. I've discovered that I really like the little FUKU and the sharks that come with it at Mojo's in Aggieville.
And so what I decided to do for my final kind of the culmination of my project was to start the process of making a resource for others on those coping mechanisms. And so I created a blog that I hope to start using. Right now I kind of just made the framework, but the idea would be that each post would be a different coping mechanism, and that it would be something for students, for people my age to engage with and be able to go to as a resource when they're trying to figure out how to cope with the stress in their life.
Now I know when I move on to my next school, like keeping those relationships with people, and if I'm going to say that's my value, then I need to really work on keeping those relationships, even though I'm not going to be in the same area. So I think that was my underlying cause. And once I started to meet with those people purposely and build those relationships back up again, I did feel happier. I felt like I was actually able to make decisions, which in a way, it's weird how this mortarboard thing led to me making progress on this problem.
The third one comes in with the horse aspect of my life, but I think it's more representative of the fact that I used to place so much stock in other people's opinions of the decisions that I make. This picture that's about to flash up on the screen is of a horse named Star Charlie, who I, within 3 days, found interest in and booked a plane, a vet, and went to see him in Kentucky. It didn't end up working out because of something in the vet exam, but this is something that my parents thought was an absolutely irresponsible financial decision. A lot of my friends were like, what's the rush? They didn't get it. But I felt a really strong pull to do it, and I went with my gut versus what everybody else was saying.
So overall, I think that this project really helped me to listen and kind of dig to the root of things, because I think a lot of times, like I said, I do assume people's intent. I am very impatient, and so a lot of times I do just think to myself, oh, this is not good, this isn't correct, but it's not that it's not correct, it's just not the way that I view it, and there's a lot of reasons behind that.
And so I got to learn a lot. I mean, I learned what I prioritize and why I prioritize those things. And so, yeah, that was kind of my project, I guess. It was cool.
Like I said, you don't have to be diagnosed with a mental illness to take care of your mental health. And while I think it's very valuable that people with a diagnosed mental illness know how to cope, I also think that every individual can use coping mechanisms to deal with stress and anxiety in their life.
So knowing that I found an underlying cause through a project that doesn't even seem related was pretty cool.
The way my mom described it later was, she was like, I was furious with you, but at the same time I had to have respect for the decisions that you made, because you just gave us the most polite FU I've ever heard.
And the cool thing about the iLead project is that it's not just a final project for a class. You know, it's something that affects my life, and it's something that I'm excited about because it's made me a better leader.
And I really realized when I started to make more decisions for myself that I was taking better care of myself and that I was happier, and hopefully that will continue on.
This next picture that's going to flash up on the screen is of a lady that is related to this fourth example. Her name is Alicia Burton. I have idolized her since I was 13. About a week ago, she posted on Facebook and her website that she had a job opening for an assistant for 6 months to 2 years on her tour in Australia. And I normally wouldn't have even applied for it. I would have thought, you know, I have my job here, my life here, my horses. There's no way I could pack up everything and leave. But part of me said, you know what, this could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What's the harm? So I sent her an email with my resume, and I was the only one that she ended up replying to. So I'm currently deciding whether or not I am going to be in Brisbane, Australia on the 15th of May for the next 6 months. I don't know if it's going to happen just because I have to find care for my horses and stuff, but even the fact that out of hundreds of applicants worldwide, because she opened this up to anybody that wanted to apply, that I was her first choice.
The Staley School of Leadership Studies has a mission statement of developing knowledgeable, ethical, caring, inclusive leaders for a diverse and changing world. I believe that my project supports that mission because it's helping me become more knowledgeable about my mental illness. It's allowing me to care for myself better and know how to care for others better. And it's providing a resource for other leaders to know how to care for loved ones with mental illnesses.
I think it was cool that we both got to talk about our values and the value of relationships and where that played a part in our lives. So it was, I don't know, when we were talking about our iLead projects, we just kind of noted some similarities and differences, and so we thought we'd share it together.
Yes, and Brandy kind of kept me on top of things. She'd ask me how things were going with my position. So,
yeah.
So
teamwork
makes the dream work.
It always has, always will.
I really believe that this project is helping me become a better leader.
And even if that doesn't pan out, I think that and a lot of the other decisions that I made through this self-exploratory process are definitely going to do nothing but help me.
So I think that more than anything, this helped me to look at the underlying values that were coming into play in these different areas and all of these different people and their views on things. And yeah, to a certain extent, I think that it did help me to be more patient. But I think the biggest thing was it helped me to understand the intent of others.
I'm really excited to see what other people have been learning throughout the semester, because I know that all of us, through our own projects and our own endeavors, are becoming not only better leaders, but better people.
It's been a growing experience, and I'm grateful for the people that I've gotten to know through it and through some of the memories that I've gotten to make from it.
So that's all we have. Okay.
Okay, bye, class.
Bye.